They gathered at dawn, outside the town hall, coffee steaming under the flag's slow rise. An officer mocked her for a faded patch on her sleeve, saying rules didn't bend for sympathy. Then the captain stepped forward, rein still clinging to his cap, and when he saw the small seal insignia, his hand rose in a silent salute that stilled the crowd. Quietly, the air changed. Honor had spoken louder than rank. Let me take you back. November 11th, Veterans Day, Port Winston held its breath. The morning light came through the courthouse blinds in thin, nervous stripes. The flag outside barely moved, as if it too were waiting to see who would speak first. Inside, the town board sat in a crooked line of folding chairs. Paper cups, steaming microphones, humming. Frank Danner stood alone at the front of the room. His work jacket was zipped to the collar, the edges of a service badge just visible where the fabric folded. The chairman cleared his throat 3 times for authority, 1 for fear. Mr. Danner, before we proceed, you'll acknowledge the infraction. Frank nodded once. Infraction. The word hung like static. All he'd done was repair the flag pole at the post office without a permit. The same pole half the board members saluted every holiday. A pause. Then the clerk read the citation aloud. Each syllable landed dull against the room's plastered walls. Behind the board, a calendar still showed 1947 instead of 1949, the wrong founding date on the town's own plaque. Frank noticed, and so did the kid in the back row. He let the number hang there, a quiet contradiction. You may apologize, the chairman said. Then we'll close the record. Frank's eyes drifted to the floorboards, scuffed by decades of town meetings of promises and complaints. He inhaled once, slow, deliberate, the way sailors steady themselves before a storm. I'll stand, he said, but I won't apologize for fixing what was broken. A soft gasp rolled through the hall. Someone's coffee spoon clinked against porcelain. Another chair leg scraped backward. The microphone caught the sound of his breath and threw it back through the speakers like a heartbeat. Jacob, the apprentice mechanic from Frank's shop, sat half hidden near the exit. His cap was in his hands, twisting. The kid's eyes moved between the board and the man he'd learned to call Sir only outside of work. Frank reached up, thumb brushing the edge of the badge under his jacket. The metal was cool grounding. It wasn't defiance, it was memory. Years of standing at attention when standing was the only order left. The chairman leaned toward the mic. Mr. Danner, that's not a request. Frank lifted his chin. Then it's a test. Silence. Even the ceiling fan hesitated. In that suspended second, the town measured itself not by who shouted, but by who stayed steady. A woman near the back whispered, "He could just say sorry." Another voice answered, "He already did by showing up." The clerk's pencil broke. Paper rustled like dry leaves. Frank's boots remained planted where the tape on the floor marked speaker. Behind him, Jacob exhaled through his nose, half pride, half disbelief. Outside, a gull screamed over the harbor, reminding everyone the world was still moving. Inside, the air thickened until the chairman finally looked away. The microphone popped a nervous tick of machinery that couldn't stand the quiet any longer. Frank turned toward the exit, each step slow, measured, respectful. The door hinges sighed, and in that breath between closing and echo, every person in the hall realized what they'd just witnessed. Not rebellion, not insolence, but the purest form of composure. He didn't kneel, and everyone heard it. The morning light crept through the workshop windows, slicing thin bars of gold across the benches. Dust floated in it like lazy confetti. The smell of oil metal and burnt coffee made the air feel honest. Frank Danner stood at the lathe, slow turning a brass sleeve that purred under his hand. The rhythm was steady, an old sailor's heartbeat turned mechanical. Across the shop, Jacob mopped at a carburetor with a rag far too clean for the job. The radio murmured somewhere between static and song. One of those local stations that never quite reached full volume. Frank liked it that way. Noise was fine as long as it didn't demand attention. Jacob broke the silence. "You gonna tell me what's under the jacket, sir?" Frank didn't look up. "You mean the coffee stain or the patch?" The kid grinned. "The patch. Folks at the diner said it glinted yesterday like it wanted to be seen." Frank shut off the lathe. The machine slowed with a sigh, the sound of work catching its breath. He pulled the jacket from the peg. The metal badge caught the light, half-worn initials barely readable, EB. Jacob leaned closer. "Who's EB?" "Someone who taught me how to keep things running when everything else quits," Frank said. He laid the badge on the bench. The brass was dull at the edges, bright in the center like memory itself. "Looks heavy," Jacob said. "Weight's not the problem," Frank answered. "It's what it reminds you to carry." The coffee pot clicked off. Frank poured 2 cups, one chipped, one new. Steam ghosted between them. "You ever fix something that didn't want to be fixed?" he asked. "Every day," Jacob said, smiling. "Mostly my own mistakes." Frank chuckled low and rough. "You'd fix the sun if it came loose." The laugh warmed the cold corners of the shop. Even the radio static softened like it was listening in. Then the silence returned, the kind that settles after a truth lands. Outside, a gull crossed the light. The beam flickered across the badge, revealing those letters again. "What happened to him?" "EB," Jacob asked carefully. Frank rubbed a thumb over the metal. He believed mercy was weakness. Took years to prove him wrong. Jacob waited. Frank didn't meet his eyes, just stared at the badge, as if it might answer for him. "Thing is," he said at last, "mercy's not weakness, it's the hardest gear to hold." Jacob nodded, though he wasn't sure he understood. He'd never thought of kindness as mechanical. But Frank made everything sound like an engine you could tune if you listened close enough. A truck backfired out on Main Street. Both of them flinched, then laughed at the reflex. Frank set the badge back on its peg, half hidden again beneath the jacket. "You ever gonna wear it proper?" Jacob asked. "When the day calls for it," Frank said. "Not before." The radio drifted into another old hymn. Jacob watched him adjust the tuning knob with the same care he gave to bolts and bearings. There was a grace in the way the older man moved, like everything he touched had a chance to forgive itself. The coffee cooled. The tools gleamed. The silence grew thick, but not empty, more like a pause that had earned its right to exist. Then Jacob caught himself holding his breath, waiting for a sound that never came. The boy was starting to believe silence had sound. The porch swing groaned with every sway, a wooden rhythm older than either of the men who sat on it. The wind carried the faint hum of a church choir from down the hill's Sunday rehearsal for a Monday that always came too soon. Frank Danner tilted his coffee cup, watching the last drop chase itself along the rim. Eli Brooks sat beside him, uniform long gone, but posture still squared, the kind of straightness the body forgets, but the soul remembers. His hands trembled, though not from the cold. "Heard about the meeting," Eli said. "You didn't bow." Frank smiled faintly. "Wasn't built to." "That's the problem with builders," Eli said, nodding toward the shop visible through the screen door. "You stand up so long, you forget when to rest." Frank didn't answer. The light flickered through the slats, a slow blink that turned the air gold, then gray, then gold again. Between shifts, motes of dust danced like patient ghosts. Eli's eyes found the edge of the badge pinned inside Frank's jacket. "You still carry that thing," Frank thumbed the metal. "Habit. Or guilt." Frank looked away. The choir hit a high note that cracked at the edge of harmony. He gave it to me, Frank said. Said it'd remind me to stay sharp. Sharp's not the same as hard, you know, Eli murmured. That badge has seen more than you care to tell. The older man leaned back. The swing creaked the boards beneath them, answering with low complaint. You ever wonder, Frank asked quietly, if we learned the wrong lessons about control, I mean? Eli chuckled. Control's like morphine. Use just enough, it helps. Use too much, you forget how pain keeps you honest. A gust of wind slipped through the porch screens, lifting the edge of Frank's sleeve. The badge flashed again, initials bright EB. Eli's gaze caught on it. Well, I'll be damned, he said softly. Didn't think you kept my old initials clean. Frank blinked. You gave it to me. Loaned it, Eli corrected. Never figured you'd turn it into a sermon piece. Frank laughed, a rare sound, low and genuine. Guess I needed something louder than my pride. The choir faded. The wind stayed. Between them, silence folded like a blanket, warm but heavy. You taught me plenty, Eli, Frank said. But mercy, that one took years. Mercy's a stubborn teacher, Eli replied. Don't worry, she still grades me too. Another long silence. Then Eli spoke again, voice softened by age and porch light. You know what's coming, don't you? They won't leave it alone. Frank nodded once. They'll test it again. They always do. Then listen close, Eli said, leaning forward. Silence isn't surrender. It's a weapon if you know how to hold it. The wind rose, knocking an empty mug from the rail. It rolled, clattered, and settled at their feet. Funny, Frank said, I used to think silence was what happened when you ran out of things to say. Nah. Eli smiled. It's what happens when you finally mean it. A quiet beat passed. Porch boards sighed, the swing moved once more. The light flickered, steadying itself after the gust. Eli's eyes found the horizon, gray turning to dusk. Tomorrow, he said, someone will test how quiet you can be. Frank's gaze stayed on the badge. Then they'll learn what quiet sounds like. The choir's last note lingered in the wind, holding the porch in place between the past and what was coming. The rain came first, as a whisper soft against the tin roofs of Port Winston, then built into a steady drum. Floodlights cut narrow cones through the mist, catching the shine on helmets and the sheen of soaked asphalt. Frank Danner stood at the edge of the drill yard, coat collar up, waiting for orders that no longer made sense. Captain Hale's voice cracked through the loudspeaker, rough with impatience. Move the convoy forward. Let's prove this town can still follow instructions. Engines grumbled awake. The line of vehicles jerked, headlights flaring through the downpour. Frank saw the gap immediately, a rookie standing too close to the path of the lead truck, visibility near zero. Hold, Frank shouted, hand up. The radio sputtered. Hale turned toward him, rain tracing white lines down his cheeks. You don't countermand me, Danner. There's a man in your blind spot. You think I don't see my own field? Frank didn't wait for permission. He ran forward, boots splashing through puddles that smelled of oil and cold iron. He slammed his palm flat on the hood metal vibrating beneath his skin and yanked the young recruit backward. The tire missed by inches. The yard froze. The only sound left was the rain drumming its verdict. Frank straightened, soaked through, breathing steady. The recruit stared up at him, wide-eyed, alive. Hale stomped closer, face red from a mix of fury and shame. Water streamed off his cap brim like sweat. That was insubordination, he snapped. Frank said nothing. Silence met authority again, and it didn't blink. Hale's hand twitched toward the service pistol on his belt habit, not threat, but the gesture was enough. The crowd tensed. Then his gaze dropped, drawn by the flash on Frank's chest. The rain had darkened his coat until the fabric clung close, revealing the brass badge beneath EB etched deep, shining through the stormlight. Hale's jaw slackened. "Where did you get that?" Frank looked down at it once, thumb brushing the initials. "From the man who earned your rank the day you were still learning how to salute." The captain's breath caught. Memory moved behind his eyes, an image of a medic pulling him from wreckage years ago, a man named Eli Brooks. The same letters, the same quiet steadiness. He took one step back, the pistol lowered. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. "Eli was my commanding officer." Frank nodded. "And my friend. He left me that badge the day he decided mercy could outrank pride." Hale stood motionless, rain soaking his uniform flat against his chest. The yard was silent, except for the hum of engines idling under restraint. Then, slowly, uncertainly, he raised his right hand. Not in defense, in recognition. The salute began small, but the motion spread. One by one, the recruits followed. Rain ran down their sleeves, down their faces, washing the anger clean. Frank didn't return the gesture. He simply stood, letting the sound of the rain carry the meaning. A flashlight beam cut across the yard, landing on the badge like a spotlight. For a heartbeat, it glowed brighter than the flood lamps. He felt the weight of years lift off his shoulders, the invisible hands of command no longer pressing him down. He was pinned by protocol no more. Hale's hand trembled in the air, then steadied. He nodded once, the gesture small, but final. The storm softened around them. Someone killed the engine, and in the sudden hush, the rhythm of rain and breathing filled the space where orders used to live. Jacob watched from under the awning hat over his chest. He'd never seen silence do so much work. Frank turned toward the horizon, rain misting across his face, badge gleaming like forgiveness. The salute still held behind him, a town standing taller than it had in years. The quiet one louder than orders. By morning, the rain had washed the town clean, but the story hadn't gone anywhere. Someone from the drill yard had filmed it, a shaky phone clip of silence, and a single salute, and by sunrise, it was everywhere. On the town feed, between pancake specials and church notices, the video played again and again. No music, no caption, just that still moment when command bowed to quiet. At May's diner, the coffee never stopped pouring, but conversation did. Screens glowed blue across the counter. A few regulars whispered, others just watched. The hum of the old fridge filled the gaps where gossip usually lived. Frank sat in his usual booth jacket folded beside him. The badge lay on the counter under the lamp's amber glow, catching each swirl of steam from his cup. For once, he didn't seem to notice. May approached with her steady rhythm pot in one hand, towel over the other. "Refill." "Guess I earned it," Frank said. She poured. The coffee rippled the reflection of the badge bending with the heat. "You fix engines and egos, Frank," she said with a grin. "Not bad for a quiet man." He chuckled softly. "Engines don't argue much." "Town does," she replied. "But not today." The bell above the door jingled. A mailman stepped in, raincoat, half-buttoned phone in hand. "Frank," he said, "you seen this thing online? They're calling it the Quiet Salute." Frank frowned. Didn't figure silence was newsworthy. "Apparently it is," the man said. "Over 2,000 views, and it's not even 9 yet." From the back booth, Jacob watched his mentor hide a sigh behind the rim of his mug. He was proud but uneasy, like someone who'd repaired something meant to stay broken. A kid at the counter replayed the video again, frame by frame. "Rain flashlight salute." "That's you," he whispered. "That's our town." May leaned on the counter, lowering her voice. Funny thing, she said, people fight for years trying to be heard, and you go and teach us the opposite. Frank smiled faintly. I didn't teach anything. Folks just saw what they already knew. Outside, the flag above the diner flapped once, snapping into its proper shape before resting again. Steam drifted past the window, ghosting the glass. Inside, everything moved slow, the kind of pace that makes memory take root. The sheriff walked in next, hat dripping. He didn't sit. Just stood by the door, tipping his brim toward Frank. Town council issued a statement, he said. Revised the regulation. Said you acted in accordance with community interests. Frank raised an eyebrow. That their way of saying thank you? About as close as they get, the sheriff replied, smiling. Laughter rippled light and genuine, then faded back into the warm quiet that seemed to follow Frank wherever he went. May wiped the counter and set down a fresh slice of pie. On the house, she said, for whatever you fixed last night. He looked at her puzzled. Didn't fix much. You fixed something invisible, she said. That's harder. Frank let the words sit. Outside, the traffic light blinked through the drizzle green, then red like the heartbeat of the town itself. A church bell in the distance marked 10 o'clock. Jacob stepped up beside the booth, hat in hand. Whole shop's talking about it, he said. They're proud. Frank studied his reflection in the coffee. They should be. They stood taller than I did. The diner went still. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause long enough to agree. The badge gleamed once under the light, bright, then calm again. He smiled, small and certain. But it was the town that stood taller. The wind outside the shop carried the same chill it had the morning Frank Danner first opened it, quiet, salt-edged, reliable. The tools were still there, neatly hung by size and memory. But the hum of the man who once filled the space had faded into something softer. Jacob unlocked the door light, falling across the bench where the badge used to rest. The metal caught the sun, even through glass. Brass never forgets how to shine. He moved slowly, almost reverently, brushing away a film of dust as though waking it. From the pegboard, he took a small frame. Frank's photograph from Veterans Day, the faintest smile beneath his cap brim. Jacob set it above the workbench, right where the morning light would touch it first. Then he reached into his pocket and drew out the badge. The initials still glowed faintly, E.B. He turned it once in his hand, the way Frank used to when a thought took too long to say aloud. You said it wasn't yours, Jacob whispered. Guess that means it's everyone's now. He hung the badge beneath the photograph, centered it with the care of a man tuning an old engine. When he stepped back, the whole wall seemed straighter. The shop felt like it exhaled. Outside the porch, wind rose gentle but certain, rattling the sign that still read Danner and Son Mechanics. He'd never changed the name. Didn't plan to. The radio on the counter came to life by itself, an old circuit finally finding contact. The host's voice was warm, gravelly, the same late-night tone Frank used to listen to. A hymn hummed under the static, a choir somewhere far off. Jacob leaned against the bench, staring at the tools at the memory. Some fixes aren't mechanical, he said quietly, repeating the line Frank had left him. They're moral. The words landed like a key turning home. He stood a little taller after saying them, shoulders finding a weight they could keep. Later that week, the library held a small ceremony. Nothing formal, just a few chairs, the town choir, and a photo of Frank on the new Veterans Board. The same image Jacob had framed. Beneath it, a brass plate read, Frank Danner Service Without Sound. May was there with coffee and paper cups, the sheriff with his hat in hand. Captain Hale at the back row, eyes lowered. When the pastor asked for a moment of reflection, nobody spoke. They just listened to the hum of the lights, the creak of the floorboards, the way quiet filled the space, like a song finally learned. Jacob looked to the picture, to the badge beneath it. His hand rose instinctively. The motion was slow, deliberate, a salute. Not military, not ceremonial, just human. Outside the porch, wind shifted through the open door, carrying the faint sound of the choir. The hymn wove through the silence, soft as breath, steady as memory. He let his arm fall, smiling through the kind of stillness Frank had once called peace. In that small, ordinary moment, the town felt different, lighter, surer, as if everyone inside it had remembered something worth keeping. The radio faded out, leaving only wind and the faint echo of a man who had taught them all that dignity didn't need an audience. If this story moved you, share it forward. The morning light spilled through the shop window, turning the hanging tools into a choir of brass. Outside the porch, wind carried the faint hum of Sunday bells. Still, Jacob stood before the framed photo, the badge gleaming beneath it, knowing some lessons are taught only once and never forgotten. He whispered what his mentor had said. Some fixes aren't mechanical. They're moral, and the sound seemed to steady the room like a lamp left burning in a winter window. Then the library bell rang, a soft reminder that quiet men build loud legacies, and across the street, the choir began another hymn. He lifted his hand, one last salute, small, certain, and enough.